Good afternoon and welcome to today's Onboard webinar. My name is Robert Donald and I'm part of the client success team here at Chaikin Analytics. And our job is pretty simple. It's to help you be successful using the Chaikin platform. So to that end, let's get started. And also happy Friday. So in addition to the software, there are other things involved in your membership that you should take advantage of. First is our members only sessions, which include the Monday Open Forum. This meeting has a variety of different topics, as you can see from viewing past recordings, or you can see it once it opens. But some sessions are specifically dedicated to specific parts of the platform. You have Q&A with Mark, Q&A with Dan, incorporating buy-sell signals into the process, the analysis process. That's real important. Overbought, oversold indicator, also equally important. Sector and market rotation. So these are all educational in nature, and along with the pre-market analysis and the options idea sessions are all part of what's included in your membership. They're all accessible via clicking on product resources and then clicking on members only sessions. Sessions are offered both live and recorded. The Monday Open Forum is generally posted Tuesday morning, and both pre-market and options ideas are generally posted within an hour or two of their completion, and from there they can be downloaded and viewed at your convenience. Certainly a major value. Other information, you will receive a daily email from Dan Russo, our Chief Market Strategist, that contains Morning Insights. Morning Insights is Dan's view of the market, what he's looking at, what you hypothetically could be looking at. Usually includes a suggested stock. Remember, we're not investment advisors, but what they'll approach or what they'll find in Morning Insights is a specific recommendation. And I should know, but I don't remember what he picked for today. Oh, he picked Intel. Includes a chart and includes some commentary on our data around Intel. And from there would encourage you, our members, to take a look at it, see if it matches your investment parameters and timeframes. It may not. There's no guarantee. In all honesty, I've taken picks or suggestions from Dan and had very positive outcomes, but I don't take every suggestion that Dan makes because sometimes they're just not compatible with my own goals. And obviously, this isn't the Rosetta Stone or the Holy Grail. You've got to have an idea what you want to accomplish. How do you want to invest? What kind of trades do you want to make? And from there, you can use our platform to get a directional edge and improve your process. If you think you can come in and just buy all bullish stocks and get rich, do the world a favor. For every time you want to do a trade like that, give $10 to the SPCA. You'll lose less money. It'll still be tax deductible. And you'll be doing some dogs some good. On the other hand, if you want to take the time to learn the product, learn our data, and apply it to the trading you want to do, then your chances of success increase exponentially. The other publication is Sunday afternoon, Market Insights, generally done by Mark Chaikin. Mark doesn't write it every single weekend, but most he does. And this is Mark's view on the market itself, as well as he generally includes a screen that he thinks is going to work. And again, well worth your time to to read both days. You can access them if they're not in your email or you've inadvertently deleted them by simply clicking here and going to Market Insights or Morning Insights. We also have a daily video. Dan Russo does this live on Stock Market Today. And we post it on the web page at the conclusion of the live broadcast. I believe the live broadcast is 8:45 to 9 a.m. Eastern. And to some extent, this is supplemental to the Morning Insights newsletter, but it doesn't necessarily, no, it's definitely worth watching. Let's put it that way. So let me close that out. All that content is accessible here. Now, also under the red microphone, and when your microphone is blinking red like this, that indicates new content has been posted. We do, Client Success owns this page. We will post at least once a week another Dan Russo video of what he thinks about the previous week and going into next week. We also post things that we find relevant. We, the week of November 12th, wanted to talk about sector rotation. And before that, back in October, we put together some content around buy rights and covered calls. And a lot of this is just basically based on what we're hearing from you, the members. Because if we're starting to see a trend or a lot of, common questions around an issue, we'll try to address it in content like the microphone, so that to some extent you guys can learn from each other. The support function is, there's live support Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to close to 5. We all take public transportation and have to get out of the city somehow. That's accessible at by calling 877-978-6257, or you can simply click on the question mark icon and put your question right in there and click send. Once you click send, it's logged in our support system. And the benefit of that is it becomes a trackable support ticket, so that if you are trying to reach me and you have no way of knowing necessarily that I'm off snowboarding in Vermont, by going through the question mark, that request will be seen by somebody immediately. And it is probably the most reliable way to reach us. It also creates an event that can be tracked and monitored, so that basically we're simply providing the best customer experience we can. To that end, each member is assigned a customer success manager. As part of your membership, you're free to consult with us after this particular session. If you've watched an onboard on your own and you've gotten a basic overview of the platform, then it's time to schedule a call with your customer success rep. And it's as easy as opening a ticket under the question mark and saying, would like to receive a one-on-one. It's all part of your membership. It is in our mutual best interest if you learn to use the platform effectively. It's going to be a whole lot easier to get you to renew your agreement when it expires if you've made money trading to the extent that we confirm our value. So that's why it's a win-win. But you shouldn't be afraid to do that. If you're not sure about a chart, especially early in the process, don't be afraid to call us. We can't tell you. I can't tell you if buying CVS right now is something you should do. What I can do is I can read the chart on CVS and I can interpret our data and provide insight into how I would interpret the data, which then hopefully you can use to make a wise investment decision. But remember, we cannot and will not give you investment advice. I can't say, hey, you know, buy CVS at 75.51. It's the deal of the century. Not allowed to say that. I'm not licensed to do so, and arguably maybe I don't have the skill set to do so. What I can say about CVS is look at the relative strength, the money flow, and the power gauge. All look very positive. Look at overbought, oversold. Well, maybe the timing isn't right, and more about that later. And from there, you can decide whether you want to execute a trade now, you want to execute a trade in the week. Up to you. We just give you some degree or some sense of guidance. And it's something you're paying for, so don't hesitate to ask for it. I don't believe that, or I've personally worked for companies quite a bit larger than Chaikin who had fewer resources dedicated to the success of their members. So by all means, take advantage of it. You're paying for it anyway. So let's get down to business about navigating the platform. First thing you want to learn how to do is search for a stock. Two ways to search. First, you can search by ticker. In that case, BMY, and for no particular reason other than somebody just asking me about their stock. So I type in BMY for Bristol Myers Squibb, and from here I've got two choices. I can hit the plus sign or the workspace icon. So I'm going to click the workspace icon. As you can see, my chart's updating to Bristol Myers Squibb, but you can also see that I have not added Bristol Myers to my list. Now, the reason for this is as you look at a stock, and I'm looking at Bristol Myers, and you know, I like the relative strength. I like the power gauge. I like that they don't report earnings until January. And I like this interesting rise in money flow. What I'm lacking is a little time. It needs to be oversold. And this all comes in the form of the checklist. As you can see, the checklist just did everything I did. Regards overbought, oversold is neutral, although I think there's a day or two left before it gets to completely oversold. So the checklist is also your friend. And I expand right here. The last person I talked to wanted to see a chart as big as possible. So click expand here, and I'll go ahead and search for a dividend, especially on a company like Bristol Myers. So it went ex-dividend October 3rd. They have not announced a dividend, their next ex-dividend date. What I do in that case is I go 3 months out. And I'm assuming that they will issue their next dividend on or about January 3rd, 2020. I'll also go check the earnings, and the earnings aren't until January 23rd. So in the realm of swing trading, sort of got a month. And I'll talk more about that in a little while, but in addition to calling the chart up, I thought I'd give a little bit of guidance on how to read a chart. Okay, I got a question of how can I specifically find bullish stocks that are oversold. I promise I'll get to that. Short answer is you use the screener, and that will be an integral part of the presentation. I just want to get to get through the navigation stuff first, if you can bear with me. So say that I want to search by company name. I got to find somebody who's not on my list. So I typed in Microsoft. Obviously, it gives me Microsoft. Not a big surprise there. Now this time, instead of typing or clicking on this worksheet icon, I'm going to click on the plus sign, which will do two things. First thing it does is add Microsoft to my current active list. My current active list is my stocks, and you can see that that's why it's active. Now Microsoft is added to it, and it also displays Microsoft's chart. Now say I've done my review on Microsoft and decided I don't want to put it in a watch list. I don't need it for anything. I'm not ready to trade Microsoft. And this is an example only, not a reflection on Microsoft. I worked for them for 5 or 6 years. Great company to work for. Wish I had kept more of their stock. But say that I'm done with Microsoft for the purposes of this list. And I like to keep my list short. The only thing I'll put on a list is something that I believe I may trade in the next 4 or 5 trading days. Anything else? Chaikin Analytics has got plenty of storage in the cloud. So I'm sick of Microsoft. What I'll do is click on it, look for the X, click on the X, and see you Microsoft. Just that. That's how you add or delete a stock from a list. Let's talk about new lists. So I'd click on this icon. And of course, this is going to default to the last time I've made a list. And since I'm lazy, that's what I'm going to go with. So you've typed the list name, as I have here, Goose's stocks. And you know, what's Goose? Goose is one of my dogs. Once I type that list, I click enter or return, whatever you want to call it. As you can see, it names the list here and Goose's stock appears here. Doesn't have any symbols in it, but that's by design. So I can go to my stocks and I can decide that I want to go ahead and I'm doing a shift arrow down here for copy. I could also gone in and done this. Well, actually, I went in and shift arrow down was to highlight the cells. Now I'll go to Goose's stocks and I'll right click and hit paste, and I can transfer those stocks over to Goose's stocks. And as you can see, they still exist on my list here. So certainly you can add, subtract, and move stocks between the various different lists. Now, I realize many of you have multiple accounts, larger portfolios, and perhaps entering tickers one at a time is not your idea of a fun-filled weekend. So we do support an import function. Simply click the icon at the top here. It'll bring up a menu. Select Import List. As you can see, it brings up a dialog box, and I'll choose the file. And it may come as quite a surprise to you that I actually have a list already prepared. And as you can see, the name of the file is Jack Stocks, and the list name defaults to Jack Stocks. It'll go ahead and tell me where the tickers start, what column they're in, and it also talks about the format, which in this case is comma-separated variables, or it's .csv, and I'll click Import. And the system will create a list called Jack Stocks that is also populated because I've imported the tickers. Just that simple. So let's talk about some of the attributes of a list. This control up here opens and closes the list menu. So right now it's open, but say I wanted to see this chart in greater detail. Whoops. I'll click it again. Okay, now it's suppressed. You can see that this makes the present chart bigger. And, like anybody else, it's a function of real estate available on a display. So you can, you can suppress this list view to get your charts as big as possible. Another attribute of a list in Chaikin Analytics is something called the power bar. The power bar is up here, and quite simply, it is a count of bullish, neutral, and bearish stocks. And in this case, I've got 5 bullish, 7 neutral, and 0 bearish. Now, I do an extra step when looking at the power bar. At face value, it's fine, but I go a little bit deeper, and I have a neutral plus. Neutral plus, by definition, is and I'll just show you the chart, a bullish stock trading below its 200-day moving average. As you can see, this is trading quite a bit below its 200-day average, and its days as a bullish or a neutral plus stock they might be limited. You also have a neutral minus stock, which is a bearish stock trading above its 200-day moving average. So I would argue that I really have 5 bearish, and that I have that I would have 6 bullish, and then 1 true neutral, which is MGM. And a true neutral is a stock that, as a result of our process, we don't feel comfortable with the directionality involved. Okay, positive and negative attached to neutral. Neutral plus means a bullish stock trading below its long-term trend. This is our long-term trend, and it's actually the 200-day double exponential moving average. A neutral minus is a bearish stock trading above its long-term trend. And again, you can see this is trading well above the long-term trend here. Both neutral plus and minus are technical adjustments that that Mark wanted to include in the package because, to Mark's mind, and when your name's on the door, you get to do whatever you want. I'm just being a wise ass. It actually makes perfect sense. By classifying MCS in this case as a neutral plus, we're recognizing the bullish trends. And let's look at this a little bit. These are the power gauge factors. Power gauge is 4 major factors, each of which has 5 sub-factors. And you can drill down to see that. Now, this is a fundamental model. So we, although I don't know the weighting, we tend to weigh the financial information fairly heavily. So look at financials as being bullish, earnings being neutral, technicals being nearly bearish, experts being nearly bullish. So you have those factors. And after running our analysis on yesterday's data, this likely came out to be scored as a bullish stock. But as a final check, we run where it is on the chart from a price standpoint. Is it above or below the long-term trend? Since this is below the long-term trend, we add the plus rating to the neutral, making it a neutral plus stock. Now, would I open a position in this stock? A little torn. Just reported in October, beat by 7. I don't like the money flow. I don't like the weak relative strength. Overbought, oversold doesn't look bad. And the power gauge rating is neutral plus, which wouldn't necessarily exclude it from buying it. But I'm somewhat concerned about the money flow and the significant drop today and what caused it. So likely I would not open a position in this stock. Neutral minus, on the other hand, and Apple's an example. Apple's kind of a sterling example of a stock that, frankly, we just don't like, or the data doesn't like. It's not whether we like it or not. It's what the data tells us. This isn't the platform, and everything that comes out of it is driven by a recurring calculation or calculations against the same data on a daily basis. In other words, a consistent process. And we know that consistent process yields the results that we talk about. So let's look at Apple quickly. Obviously trading well above its long-term trend, but you've got very strong relative strength going back to June. You've got a neutral power gauge going to neutral minus, and more or less just staying neutral. You've got good money flow, and you've had it for a while. So this is a possible. Okay, so we're back to neutral plus simply means that it is a bullish stock trading below its 200-day moving average. Whether or not there's going to be an upward trend would be to look as much at money flow and relative strength. Because unfortunately, a neutral plus could turn into a neutral minus or a bearish start. So taken by itself, the power gauge rating is not necessarily predictive of an increase or a decrease. And likewise with neutral minus. You can see that Apple has been neutral minus for quite some time, and yet the stock has consistently risen right from this point. The only time frame you can change on the chart is to change from 1 year to 5 years, which has had that effect. I don't find the 5 year to be useful. And honestly, we're not a charting program. We do provide some charting information, but if you're big on charting, you would probably be best served complementing your membership with that of a charting program, or use the charting program within your trading platform. I know that for all my charting requirements, if I'm doing some kind of a deeper look at a chart, I just use the chart in Fidelity, the charting from Fidelity's Active Trader, and it works fine for me. Don't know that it'll work fine for you, but it's at least an idea. So we moved on, power board, copy and least. So let's go ahead and dig a little deeper into what you're seeing in front of you. This is called the workspace view. It's where you'll likely spend most of your time. And this is the place where you are able to look at charts, plain and simple. So what you have across here is we have SPY. We use SPY as a proxy for the S&P 500. So if you want to know where the S&P 500 is, add a 0. to what we have for SPY. Same thing with Dow Jones or DIA, which we use as the proxy, and QQQ for NASDAQ as well, although I don't know off the top of my head the factor. It may just be add a single zero to get that to where the NASDAQ's currently trading. Here you have different views. This is called the watch list view, where you're seeing the chart with all the data. You can also go to a tiled view. Now what this view shows you, and this is good if it's like a quick and dirty, you can see that you have total of 6 bullish and 6 bearish stocks. And of course you can click on either one of these stocks and go back into the chart. The final view you have is the alert view. So if there's any alerts issued on these stocks, they would appear in this view. And let me go to a different list and see if I can get a better result for alert view. All right, I'm not seeing any. I got to pick up one with an alert. All right, had anything gotten an alert? This view here, the alerts view, okay, it does show the alerts. This third view applied to your list shows alerts relative to the stocks on the list. Micron, RF, and Synchrony all have an oversold bias today. And that way, you know, I have 2 ways of getting alerts. I can take the alert view of a given list like I did here. I can also set up alerts via email. I click on this icon up here. I turn on screener, user list, and market alerts. Here I pick a swing trade alert or a stock alert email. And what I do is basically pick one of the screener lists, and I'll be alerted on the results of that screener every morning. And I'll move on to my user list. You can get alerts on a single user list. I use my stocks out of convenience and basically use my stocks as a repository for symbols. That way, I can go through and look at my alerts email. I like to do it in the morning before the market opens. Now, because I keep my list fairly short, I can ask for all the alerts. But remember that the more alerts you select, the longer the email is going to be, and the less likely you're going to be to read it. If you can't get through it in 3 or 4 minutes, you're likely not to bother, because when do you have 3 or 4 minutes apiece in the office all day? Finally, you can do the same thing for an index. And I'll go back and show you. I went too far. You know, what I'm doing is picking what I want to be alerted for, and select it. Click Save. Now my Chaikin Analytics is set up, and you know, while I'll still be using bandwidth on this connection, the rest of the meeting will be through Zoom. After workspace, you have discovery. And let's talk a little bit about discovery. Discovery is a great place to find pairs trades. Let me get on my, before I get completely on my high horse here. Looking for, well, I unfortunately don't think I'm going to be able to find it. All right. I was hoping I could find more stocks with alerts, but I'm not going to waste any time looking for them. I showed you the alert view before. If a stock does have an alert, let me go find one that I know will. Still no alerts. All right. Not going to work real well. So let's talk about the health check. The health check is applied against a list in Chaikin. So what I'm doing is running a list, running a health check on the list Chaikin recent bulls. And what this does is goes and recap of the performance for the week, a heat map, as it were, just showing where stock falls in this axis here. Where you want to be, obviously, is the green. Where you don't want to be is the orange down here. Gives you a power gauge and a price of each stock, including the neutrals, and a disclaimer. If you're an advisor, this is very helpful to show clients. I've used it to just show people the results or what the software says about stocks I have on my list. Now, with the portfolio health check, which is, by the way, based on last week's data, it was compiled and sent the week of November 17th, and I believe it was Tuesday it was sent. So, beware that this is last week's data. You can see at the top of the sheet, the week of November 17th. Now, the power gauge report is slightly different. Power gauge report deals with a specific equity, not a list. In this case, it's Ameriprise Financial. Gives you a chart. Once it goes through the chart, okay, you have specific data on the stock. Instead of saying bullish or bearish, you have actual revenue pulled from financial statements and the actual growth. And this goes back several quarters, highlights the technical information, and wraps up. But both of these are useful reports to review while you're moving a deal through the sales cycle. Okay. So let's talk about the screener. This is where you're really getting the value in the software. So what I want to do is I'll talk about the screener, then I'll talk about going back and pulling a chart aside. I'll actually screen some stocks and I'll walk through them, give you my take on them, not necessarily the right answer, but my answer. And I'll explain to you why I do what I do. So first thing, I've clicked screener up here. Now I could create a screen down here with variables that I think are important, and you're certainly welcome to do so. In fact, we'd encourage you to do so. However, we added over the past couple of months a few features that this blank page is somewhat intimidating to somebody who doesn't have a lot of database experience. Since I do, it was never a problem with me. And I would encourage you, if you want to develop your own screens, to do so. Client success, to some extent, would be happy to help you. And to make it even easier, we have starter screens. So the starter screens are spread into 4 separate categories. A classic bull, classic bear, which is something on a long-term trend, either positive or negative. And they would be consistent with a stock that perhaps you intend to buy and hold for some period of time. A bullish or a bearish swing trade, or you're actually looking for a stock that will move up or down faster than the market, and your intention is a short-term or swing trade. You also have what we call a personality change. And let me run that first because it'll give me a nice segue into explaining what a personality change means. Okay. Now, once the variables fill, click Get Results, and it will bring up a series of tickers. Now, from here, apologies. I selected a bearish, not a bullish personality change. That explains why my list was so short. Okay, so this is the results of a bullish swing trade. Now, anytime you get a series of results, I, for one, think 16 charts is a lot to look at in a day. So what you can do is you can reduce this down. What I'll do is I'll add oversold because I want to enter a position in this stock. I want it to be oversold. That brings the list down to 7. So let's see what these stocks look like. Take a look at State Street. They're a bank. And in order to help analyze State Street, first thing I do is go to the checklist. Okay, the checklist was put together specifically to help in the analysis of a stock. So say, I did pull up in the screener 5 or 10 names. Well, if I go through those 5 or 10 names and say, oh, okay, I like this State Street. It looks pretty good. I've got 5 green and I've got 1 yellow. So let's interpret that. Power gauge rating is, I'm going to close this. You're going to have to trust me that it's, well, let's see if I can move it out of the way. Nope. Okay, what it wants is the power gauge Oh, it's a power gauge rating. Well, very bullish is about as strong as you can get. Relative strength against the SPY. Nice curve up right there after it changed. Industry strength is strong. Now, industry strength is a function of the power bar of the industry that this stock is a member of. So State Street Company or State Street Corporation, the owner of State Street Bank, is actually part of an industry, and that industry is capital markets. So I should be able to go up here to industries and capital markets. And when I look at I do see that I have an oversold buy here today. And let's talk a little bit about an oversold buy. Clearly, the thing is moving toward oversold, but it hasn't turned the corner yet. You've got positive money flow, positive relative strength, a very bullish power gauge rating, and a neutral overbought, oversold. So based on that information, I would wait just a little bit longer on this stock. It's moving toward oversold, but what I'm looking for is what I have here. Right here in this move, right here, this move up off of oversold to overbought. And as you can see, there is an opportunity here based on the close. So our chart itself, I can suppress this. These green lines are the trading range for the day. And if you click on the crosshairs, you can actually measure and evaluate the trading. Okay, this is an upper band and a lower band, and they're most similar to Keltner bands. And the middle is our double exponential, or is our 21-day exponential moving average. So you have long-term trend, short-term trend. If there's an alert like there is here, you'll see it right there along with its description. And this stock triggered an oversold buy. Now, a lot of our members use signals too much, in my humble opinion. You should never use signals for idea generation. If you want to use signals for idea generation, every time you want to go do that, take $10, send it to the SPCA. Then at least you'll be taking care of helping a dog. Because if you start chasing signals, you're going to lose your money. On the other hand, if Ameriprise Financial was something that showed up on a screen you were running, you identified as a possible stock through some other research, or even through the Chaikin power gauge and data, you thought Ameriprise was going to outperform the market, and then you saw the oversold buy, that becomes more relevant. The problem with oversold buy is it doesn't look at relative strength and money flow. It looks strictly at whether the stock is overbought or oversold. So you don't have the alert doesn't really tell you anything unless you've already identified that stock as a possible, security to buy. So very careful when you do that and how you use overbought, oversold. We talked about the data points and the Fowler gauge. They're all here. Talked about the dividend page there. Like I said, this is relative strength, and it's relative strength against, really against, it's recently been changed in Florida. Basically, it looks at how the stock is performing against the S&P 500. So in this company's stock and Ameriprise, they're outperforming the SPY, outperforming there, and doing fine right along here as well. Okay, now you can do a lot of things in here. You can edit this response. Mine's been fixed. It doesn't have any bugs in it. And what you have with this arrow is here a new message you haven't read yet. You have an icon for a 1-year chart, an icon for a 5-year chart. And these are our crosshairs. As you can see, you can move it up and down and around the page. And the benefit is that it gives you a point in time, a price with a point in time. The question came up, maybe the oversold signal could be used for selling a put on the market if money flow checks out. Again, not recommended. Could you get an oversold signal? Actually, an oversold signal and a put is like the kiss of death. Oversold, when stock is oversold on Chaikin Analytics, it is at a low point and is likely to move higher in price. And let's just look at this one right here. This is where you entered it oversold. Say hypothetically you entered right here at oversold. Closing price that day was $132. So you get out there a week later. Closing price was $150. So had you entered this trade, you would have gotten slaughtered. So oversold signal should never be used to buy a put. Selling a put, maybe, but the point that you need to understand is the oversold signal should only be used on a stock that you've identified the trend, whether you're selling a put or buying a share. Honestly, if you want to chase signals, God bless you. I liken it to my dog chasing his tail and running around the backyard. He accomplishes absolutely nothing. Has a great time. It is a process based on first power gauge, second relative strength, third money flow. That identifies the stock, and it works in both directions. I mean, just I naturally default toward bullish stocks. Once these three things are lined up and the timing's right, then I'll consider a signal, but not until. And it doesn't, honestly, it doesn't matter if you're selling a put, buying a put. If everything else is not lined up, a signal is not telling you anything. A definition of an oversold buy is that the stock has reached an 8-day low, the power gauge rating is bullish, and the stock is below 30 on the overbought, oversold. Not a word about money flow or relative strength. And if you leave money flow and relative strength out of your equation, you're going to have difficulty. You're not going to be a terribly successful trader. So let's talk about this crosshairs now. And as you can see, these crosshairs give a numeric value. So as I'm watching overbought, oversold here, say that I do want to exit. I've got overbought, oversold of 80, 83, 80, 74. There's my exit right there. I've confirmed the downward trend and I'm out. Now, could I get out a day or two in advance? Yeah, I could. But you run the risk of a flat overbought. So the crosshairs are good for determining the relative strength or the money flow. Money flow is evidenced by the, right here, dollar flow. And you can see the value go up and down every day. So now the money flow has entered more or less a positive trend up. And that information is good to know. And this is the easiest way to get it. We don't support any drawing tools in our platform and are not likely to do so anytime soon. If you're interested in previous signals, you can select them. There's your oversold buys all through there. And you can see that the oversold buy is not necessarily a positive thing for this stock. I mean, oversold buy, stock dropped. Oversold buy, stock dropped. Oversold buy, stock dropped. So remember that you're looking at an alert triggered by certain technical factors, not the result of market home doing analysis. So we have upper and lower bands, and they're close to Keltner bands. It's a proprietary calculation, and it's meant to be a trading range. We have the 21 and the 200-day moving average, and the 200-day is double exponential. The 21-day is simply exponential. Next down, you have the Chaikin money flow. Now, with Chaikin money flow, basically it represents or is a proxy for institutional buying. We're not counting orders on the floor. What we're doing is we're looking at volume and price over a given day. If you want to learn more about it, go to www.chaikinanalytics.com and click on you click on products, hold for one. You actually click on about, and that'll take you down to Chaikin money flow, and that will open a page or two that gives you an explanation of Chaikin money flow, what it means, how to interpret it, how to use it. For example, right in here, you have something called a money flow divergence, where the stock is going up and the money flow is negative. You should have seen a correction right around here. And that covers a lot of the chart. Now, since the screener is capable of storing screen data, you're free to go back as often as you wish. Let's take a look at State Street. Now, we talked about overbought, oversold. Can't be emphasized enough for the purposes of using this platform. You know, your entries for a bullish trade should be as this turns up toward the top. Your exit for a bullish trade should be as it crosses from overbought toward oversold. For a bearish trade, obviously just the opposite. Enter at overbought exit at oversold. Okay, people keep asking questions about the alerts. I basically said all that I'm going to say about the alerts. You're free to look at the alerts. They're in the user's guide, what they mean. I don't use them for determining a new entry on a quality name, plain and simple. If you've identified and you've checked the stock and you like it for all the reasons I mentioned, power gauge, relative strength, money flow, then fine. Look for alerts. But as you can see, going back through this, if I was looking at State Street right now, the most recent alert for State Street was an oversold buy in September. Well, that's fine. But you didn't get any alerts recently. Nothing to do. Let me go back to my lists. Let me actually go back to a stock that I've been in and out of a couple of times over the past couple weeks. And I've been in and out of it on a very profitable basis, Akamai. I moved in and out based on earnings, and I don't think there's been any alerts on Akamai since I started coming in and out of it. No, the recent alerts are all back a couple weeks, and the point that I'm making is there could be a movement in a stock that has nothing to do and doesn't trigger an alert. That's why I am so against using alerts unless I've already identified the stock as a possibility. Again, like I said, feel free to use them to your heart's content. Next question is, do I hold through earnings or before? No, I'm out. I'm out before earnings. I do not like to hold a position through earnings unless it's a long-term hold. So, I mean, like most people, I have stocks in my portfolio that I've had for years, and barring some kind of substantial change in the stock, I'm not going to trade them. I'm not going to sell them ahead of earnings. I'm not going to even necessarily react to a price move plus or minus around earnings. These stocks I bought for a reason, and until my reasoning changes or my reason is no longer valid, I'm going to hold them. Now, once I decide to liquidate, obviously overbought, oversold is my friend. All right, so moving back to the screener. Trying to think what I screened for. All right, what I want to do is I want to get back to the idea of a personality change. That's a terrible example. I would think one of these. All right. This is what we would call a personality change. You've got neutral minus on the power gauge going to bullish right here. This was right around the end of the week of October 7th, call it October 12th. And then you move to this point and you see a change in the relative strength starting October 24th. Then you see a change in the money flow November 1st. At this point, because of these three factors, you have the makings of a bullish trade. That's what we call a personality change. Relative strength changed, money flow changed. Then it becomes a question of overbought, oversold. And it's just toggling down to another entry point. Your last entry point was actually right about here. That's where you could have gotten in. Now, you would not have seen the personality change, and it would have been a riskier trade, but you can see how the timing worked out pretty well. In October 4th, out October 28th, at a fairly substantial increase. And that's why you're using and looking for these personality changes. Now, you can also just do a simple swing trading screen. And I'll go ahead and load that. And what this screen shows is stocks that are likely to move and outperform the market. So if there's anything I looked at recently here. Figures nothing. Okay, so let's look at Timken. So you're moving toward oversold, good relative strength, good power gauge, good money flow. Checklist says everything is fine except for the oversold. Waiting for it to turn down. You got maybe a day or two. So as I'm looking at this stock, bullish power gauge, good relative strength, good money flow, just turning the corner, checklist is good, no earnings till February 16th, a dividend date November 21st, and this is looking like a setup possibly for a buy rate. So I can then go in, and I'm not going to get into a big conversation about options play. If you're interested, certainly we can help you. I don't mean to be rude. But this particular stock has a huge negative for me that only has monthly options. So while it might be ready to turn or break out, having only monthly options is not something that would interest me. So I'd go back to the screener again. And I would pick another stock. And I wish that there was some on here that, let's look at Knoll because it has a buy and it'll give us a chance to talk about buy signals. Okay, got another oversold buy here. So let's talk about that first and foremost. Timing's off for an oversold buy. This hasn't turned the corner yet. So although it triggered an oversold buy, this isn't the optimal time to tell. Now, had I identified this stock and put it on a list? Well, it wouldn't be horrible to get an alert on it. But trading on the basis of this alert is asking for trouble. So let's run this through the checklist. Now, money flow persistency is neutral. That is likely because of this lack of depth through here. It is trending toward oversold like we discussed. These three things are fine. Long-term trend is fine. And I don't necessarily think that this would be a horrible stock to own based on the data, not based on anything else. And when I trade, I do go the extra little bit. You know, when I opened a position in CVS, when I opened a position in Akamai or Micron, I did a little extra reading. You know, if somebody developed an absolutely flawless stock analysis tool, sure as heck wouldn't tell anything to anybody about it. I wouldn't. If Chaikin Analytics is right all the time, believe me, Mark wouldn't have put up with the headache of having a company and a bunch of people hanging around drinking his coffee. He would have sat at home with a laptop and traded to his heart's content. But if you follow the process, you're going to be right more than wrong. And this is part of the process. Take a look at all these attributes. In the case of this soft company, look at the checklist. You know, get comfortable about what the checklist is telling you. Money flow persistency is low. Yeah, it is, but it's been positive for a long time. Relative strength's been good for a long time. Bank's been good. Power bar's been good for a long time. All this is telling me this is possibly a good name. And the fact that I have an oversold buy alert on it just makes it that much more interesting. So I wouldn't necessarily identify this stock based on the oversold buy, but once I've looked at everything else and found it, the oversold buy is something nice to see. It knows that I'm close to an entry point. And I do apologize for ranting and raving about signals. They have their place, but they have to be understood to be what they actually are. And let's take a look at a couple of them. If God's willing, I'll be able to move them over to the active monitor. All right. So these are the buy signals. Look at oversold buy. 8-day low while the price is oversold, overbought, oversold, greater than, well, less than 30. Power gauge is bullish. Because it completely ignores money flow and relative strength. So it does have part of the picture. Now, this one is the stock crosses over its upper band while the stock is outperforming, relative strength greater than 0.6. Money flow is positive, and money flow persistency is strong. Power gauge is bullish. So while some of these factors may be relevant, not all of them are. And these are all available in the user's guide, which you can access by clicking on this textbook icon, then user's guide. And how it is arrayed is as a series of articles you can basically click on to navigate. The question was, KNL doesn't have weekly options. Yes, I know. That's one of the reasons I didn't like it. So this, basically I can't, within Chaikin, search for a stock that has weekly options. I can use the global filter and exclude non-optionable stocks, but I have to determine manually if a stock has weekly options or not. And again, this is my advice, how I trade. Doesn't mean that's right for you. You look at the lemmings, half of them, most of them walk off the cliff and meet their untimely demise. So next question is, how narrow down the best stock in a given industry and trend. You can screen on the basis of an industry. As for the trend, I think you would pick up the trend by you can do it by a couple of things. Okay, select an industry. So two-step process. Well, actually, to give an industry, I'll pick one, aerospace and defense. So what I'm doing here is I'm looking for a swing trade in aerospace, space, and defense. Gives me Teradyne. Now say I wanted to select a different industry. And I'll go ahead and update the data. And it gives me State Street. So while you can narrow down by industry, you can to some extent narrow down by trend. But it's mostly by industry. And in terms of trend, I mean, certainly overbought, oversold, certainly above or below a rising long-term trend. The variables are here, and whatever you define above or below a trend as, go ahead and look for a variable. That's all. All right, last thing I want to talk about is ETF comparison. And I want to talk about it in a couple of different lenses. First of all, we haven't talked about ETFs at all. And since the ETF power gauge is one of our strengths, probably appropriate to talk about them. So let me grab an ETF out of my list. Okay, just happened to pick XLF. Let's talk about how this differs. First element of the power gauge is a technical rank. It's a proprietary rank of the technical strength of this ETF relative to all US listed ETFs. So it's a factor in the overall power gauge rating. Okay, that's what it's defined as. Equity power gauge ratings. This basically is an analysis of the power gauge ratings for the different components of the ETF. So XLF has a certain number of stocks that it holds to become the ETF. The US equity power gauge rating is actually a reflection of those power gauge ratings, but they're not weighted for dollar value of the holding. So if you had, 3 stocks in an ETF, one that had that represented 50% of the holdings, one that represented 30, and one that represented 20, you would use weighting to balance them out and get a consistent score. And we do that with the power gauge weight rating weighted. You have also additional information here: assets, volume, beta, dividend yield, and a little bit about the ETF. If you wanted to look at the constituents of an ETF, click on the symbol, and that brings up all the constituents of XLF. Now, in terms of working with ETFs and analyzing them, ETF comparison is what I recommend. So first thing I do is I close this. I don't care about the chart. I want column data. And what I'm doing is starting with sectors. The thought behind this sort of analysis is I want to look at something that outperforms a uniform measure. If I can say to my customers, I'm outperforming SPY over the last 9 months, that's a meaningful boost to my reputation. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and go by these sectors. I'll go ahead and select a time frame. Dan Russo uses 6 months. Now, by clicking on 6 months here, I'm getting a list of ETFs that are outperforming SPY. There's SPY there. There's my 6 months. And you can see the relative performance of each. So what I've got is XLK, XLC, and XLF. I'm going to go back to the screener. And rather than industry, I'm going to screen on sectors. Going to go ahead and get XLC, XLK, and XLF. And these are the sectors that have outperformed SPY. I'm going to click Get Results. And looking at those sectors and these attributes, these are the stocks that I got. Now, I could completely change this. And let me say, I just changed the money flow and the relative strength to strong. And as you can see, I've gotten a greater number of choices. And these choices are all from those sectors. So, if you were looking for stocks in the strongest sector, that would be how you would accomplish it. So let's go back to ETF comparison. And as the time goes by, you may want to rotate. Say, we're going to change it backwards in 3 months. Well, healthcare came up, but communications went down. So at your rotation point, hypothetically, you would divest communications, pick up healthcare. And that would be how you would manage sector rotation. But you also have the opportunity of searching with the screener to find stocks in certain industries. But the other thing that you can do is I can go ahead and say, okay, XLF outperformed SPY during my 3-month period. I can also go compare XLF to a universe of similar ETFs by typing in XLF and hitting enter. Now what I'm doing is I'm comparing XLF to other financial ETFs. Now it's not going to be a match, identical to identical, but I may get some useful insight into looking at this. There's XLF, and what I find to be relevant in this case is 2 of these spider regional banks and S&P banks are doing better. Some by a point or two. So, I do have the option of trading up, and, the rotation would be roughly every quarter. And that is basically the sum of everything that I wanted to review today. For any one of you, this webinar will be posted in our members only content probably by the end of the day today. With that, I wish you a good afternoon, a good weekend, and remember, don't be a stranger. Call us. We're here to help you. And until you get very comfortable with how you can integrate our data into anything else you do and use, don't be afraid to call us. Send us a ticket. We'll be more than happy to help. Take care and have a great weekend. Thank you.